This one player can take the New York Knicks to the NBA Finals. This previous year, the Knicks had an overall successful year. They were able to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years, and they just overall had a lot of success. But although they weren't able to make it over the hump this year while losing once again in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Indiana Pacers, I'm here to tell you that the Eastern Conference is still very wide open, and I'm here to tell you that based on a few subtle changes and based on one player, the New York Knicks can make it to the NBA Finals. But quickly, before we get the video started, my name is JuicySports. I make opinionated Knicks and opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. The history of the New York Knicks has been a very interesting one. In the 2000s, for the most part, the Knicks have not been a good team. But when you look over the last 5 or so seasons, the Knicks have finally done a great job at turning themselves into a contender and turning themselves into a legitimate championship contender. And although the Knicks weren't able to make it over the hump, and they did once again lose to the Indiana Pacers, I'm here to tell you that the Knicks don't need to make significant changes in order to beat the Pacers and in order to make it to the NBA Finals. But a question that some of you may be wondering is, who is that player that I think will take the Knicks to the finals? Well, in my opinion, there's a couple of guys that could suffice, but the one guy that's on my radar and I think should be on the New York Knicks radar is Donte divincenzo. Now, obviously, Donte divincenzo was just traded last season in the Karl-Anthony Towns trade, but when you look at what Devo is doing with the Timberwolves, he isn't necessarily playing as well, or even honestly nearly as well as he was playing for the New York Knicks, and I don't think the fit is all that great for him in Minnesota. So if I were the New York Knicks, I would do a lot to make sure that I would be able to acquire or reacquire Donte divincenzo. But a question that some of you may be wondering is why? Why do I think divincenzo is so important for this Knicks roster? Well, I feel this way for a few different reasons, but the first reason that I want to touch upon is toughness. When you look at what Devo brought for the Knicks when he was with the team in their playoff runs, he brought a lot of toughness. On the defensive side of the court, of course he's not the best defender in the NBA, but he did compete and he was a pretty good defender. But also, when you talk about when the Knicks were struggling offensively or when the Knicks were struggling trying to stop a run from the opposing team, Devo was always there. He brought his toughness and, of course, most importantly, he brought his scoring. Devo did a great job at complementing what Jalen Brunson did in terms of spotting up and hitting those catch and shoot three-point jump shots, but also when Brunson wasn't playing all that well and when the Knicks desperately needed offense, Devo was able to be that guy that was that extra offensive option, was that extra guy that can create for himself, score points, and on any given night in the regular season or even in the playoffs, most importantly, Devo was a guy that was able to put up 30 or even 25 plus on any given night. And when you look at what the Knicks were able to do this previous season, although they were able to make it further than they were able to in a long time, a huge issue that the Knicks had was lack of depth. And another huge issue that the Knicks had was lack of scoring options. Yes, Jalen Brunson was able to score for the most part in the playoffs at a very high level. Yes, Karl-Anthony Towns was able to score at effectively a very high level for the most part, but when you look outside of that, OG Anunoby wasn't all that consistent. Mikal Bridges wasn't all that consistent, and obviously the Knicks didn't have or really didn't play their bench whatsoever. So all of the impetus of the scoring fell on those guys that I just mentioned. But if you bring in an extra guy like Donte divincenzo, I think he will do a lot of things for this Knicks roster. He'll take a lot of pressure off those guys that I just mentioned, because if all of those players are having an off night, divincenzo could certainly come in and pick up the slack and score 25 plus on any given night, as I mentioned. But also outside of that, he's going to add to your bench depth, or really lack thereof at this point, but he will definitely bolster your bench depth. Or even if you want to start divincenzo and you want to put a Mikal Bridges, or if you want to put an OG Anunoby off the bench, that's also certainly an option that you can go to and bolster your bench that way. But overall, I just think divincenzo brings a lot to this Knicks roster, and he brings a lot to this Knicks roster that they were missing last year. As I mentioned, I think he's going to give toughness back to this team. When you talk about their game 1 performance where they blew it against the Indiana Pacers, blowing a 14-point lead in the final 2.5 minutes, I just think if you have a guy like divincenzo on your roster, that just becomes much less likely to happen. Of course, obviously it still could happen. Players have an off night. Obviously that was kind of a freaky thing where the Knicks just stopped playing basketball and the Pacers were hitting every single shot. But I just think adding a guy with toughness like DiVincenzo will certainly be a huge benefit to this overall Knicks roster, and I do think if I were the New York Knicks, I would try to trade for DiVincenzo. Now, another question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, can the Knicks actually do this? Well, in my opinion, I definitely think they can. It probably will take a little bit and maybe trading on or moving on from some pieces that the Knicks want to keep, but overall, I do think it would be a net benefit. Maybe if you're the New York Knicks, you would have to trade Landry Shamet, or maybe you would even have to trade a Miles McBride and maybe a couple second-round picks, something centered around that. And obviously, a lot of Knicks fans, including myself, do really like what Miles McBride brings to the team. But overall, if you have a chance to get Donte DiVincenzo and you have to move on from McBride, I do probably think I would do that personally. Now, of course, if you're the Knicks, you try to get DiVincenzo without trading a valuable piece like McBride. But of course, as I always say in my videos, only time will tell what does end up happening. But overall, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Knicks should trade for Donte DiVincenzo? And do you think the addition of Donte DiVincenzo could take this Knicks roster to the finals, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.